Welcome to Lead for Good, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. This is a show where the audience will meet and get to know top nonprofit leaders. Together, we will take a deep dive into nonprofit leadership, endeavoring to uncover and unpack the most important characteristics, traits, strategies, and actions of successful nonprofit leaders. Through this journey together, we desire to help you, the nonprofit leader, grow your knowledge and capabilities to lead for good. We want you to achieve your full potential as leaders in the sector. So, welcome to the conversation. We're glad you joined us today. Without further delay, let's join our host, Chris Looney, as he interviews yet another extraordinary leader who is truly leading for good. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Lead for Good, a podcast for national leaders of all titles and all experience levels. This is a show where we explore the most important characteristics, traits, strategies, and decisions that shape successful nonprofit leadership. Our goal is simple. We want to help you grow in your capacity and confidence to lead for good. Today's conversation focuses on a reality every leader will face at some point, and that's crisis. Whether financial, reputational, organizational, or external crises happen all the time. They test not only systems and strategy, but character and leadership presence. And I'm honored to welcome Tom West to the show today. Tom, welcome to the show. We're certainly glad to have you with us.
Many thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Tom, you bring a depth of leadership experience and a steady voice on navigating high pressure situations. And today we're going to unpack what it truly means to manage through crisis and what leaders must do when everything feels very uncertain. So let's begin, though, with your own leadership journey. And I'd love to kind of learn a little bit about what's shaped you as a leader through that journey of leadership. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story? How did you become the leader you are today?
Okay, well, thank you again for having me here. I have had a long career in arts management. I began as an actor director and was terrible, or at least not prepared for the demands of the career as an artist, but always loved the arts. And after pursuing acting and directing for a number of years, I decided I'd try other adventures in industrial sales and hospitality, and came back to the idea that the arts are really where I belonged. Uh, Got a master's degree, took an internship at the Kennedy Center in Washington in fundraising,
Wow.
where really thanks to mentorship and mistakes, I worked my way up from intern to vice president of development over a period of about 7 years.
I love
And
it.
I will really credit that with two incredible leaders, Kevin McMahon, who was the executive vice president there at the time and ultimately ran the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, and Marie Matson, who was the head of development when I arrived as an intern, and really carried me through almost a decade there, um, throwing things at me that I didn't know how to do and saying, go, and I'm here when you need some help. Um, Marie is perhaps the most talented fundraiser I have ever had the privilege to work for.
High praise.
And she taught me so much of what I know, from how to raise money to how to support staff to how to deal with crisis challenge, um, and how to do it all with a level of calm and grace in the front, even when you're panicked in the back. And then other mentors I've had along the way. I went from the Kennedy Center to head fundraising at the Sagerstrom Center for the Arts in Costa Mesa, California, working with Terry Dwyer, who was a great leader. And then a little over a decade with Bob Gazzali at the American Film Institute, where I was their chief advancement officer.
Right.
Before taking a turn and coming back into live performing arts as the executive director of Atlanta Ballet, where I've had a good mentor here, a woman by the name of Virginia Hepner, who was a prominent Atlantan business leader, but also did a short turn as an interim head of the same organization that I run. So I'll credit most of it to other folks.
I love it.
Made a lot of mistakes along the way that thankfully folks have helped me unwind, learn from, and then watching other stronger leaders, really how they navigated situations that at the time I was not prepared for.
Well, speaking of those situations, I mean, you could potentially call those crisis situations. Many of them might have been, maybe some of them weren't. But when did you first encounter a moment in leadership that felt like a true crisis for you?
I'll have to say it's in my current role. Now, having been nearly 30 years in fundraising and arts management, I've lived through many crises. 9/11 among them, at a time when I was raising money for a festival of France at the Kennedy Center, and everyone was talking about freedom fries across America. Um, to the
Right.
housing bubble and the recession of 2008, where I was in Orange County, which is a community, really built
Yeah.
on real estate, um, to COVID, which threw us all for a loop, to really financial recovery in a post-COVID world, um, which is what I would say is the truest crisis I felt as an arts professional.
Okay.
And that is in this role. And I'll tell you part of the reason I feel like it is the first true crisis is because I was in the role where the buck stops. At every moment where I was the head of fundraising or in a lead fundraising position, there was someone else who was accountable for the entire organization. It is not until you feel the weight of your employees, the artists, the community you serve, the people you serve, realizing that a misstep that you make in managing a crisis can affect all of those people's lives. So I took all of the other crises that I had dealt with very, very seriously in my role, like how I could help in my role, but putting it all together and realizing that a lot of people's livelihoods were at stake, and then delivering on our mission was really at stake. And that was a financial crisis that we had coming out of the pandemic.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And what are the takeaways? How did the experience kind of shape your philosophy on leadership?
It allowed me to draw a lot on what I had learned from others. It allowed me to really lean into the idea that no one person has the answer
Okay.
and that the answers aren't always really apparent. Um, I'll describe it for you for just a second if that's helpful so folks can understand what
Great.
we're talking about. Um, Post COVID, I arrived just as we were about to go back on stage at Atlanta Ballet for the first time in more than 2 years with our Nutcracker, which in the ballet world is the revenue generator that helps
Right.
fund a lot of the other things that you do during the season that actually lose money. It's a part of the economic model of our field to have this one
That's right.
holiday thing that drives it. It was Atlanta Ballet's first production post COVID. It was, if you can put your mind back there, right as mask mandates and vaccines were as much public health discussions as they were political discussions.
Right.
There's particularly here in Georgia. So there was a resistance to we were charged with keeping everyone safe.
Right.
That meant dancers, orchestra, audiences. So we leaned into many of those levels of guidance from health authorities. Um, it was also a time that the Omicron wave of COVID was just cresting
Right.
and affected a lot of holiday events that year. Uh, and as I arrived, there had not really there the ballet was moving from a historic venue that it had performed in pre-COVID for close to 30 years into a new venue for its, holiday tradition production. And there was a lot of resistance to leaving the old holiday home of the Nutcracker
Yeah.
for folks around Atlanta. So we came through that year. We got through all of the COVID of it. Everyone was safe. We maintained health for the majority of the company. We did daily testing, all of those sorts of protocols that were at that time still a part of how we were managing the crisis of COVID. Um, but what we had not accounted for was how audiences would respond to all the restrictions, to the Omicron wave, and to the new venue. And our revenue came in about 1.2 million below budget.
Mm,
Now that's 10% of our operating budget, at least it was in that year.
yeah.
So we still had the cash to power through the season, even though we took a huge loss. The following season, we had some learnings. We grew our revenue substantially, but still not where we needed to be. We learned that there was more to the resistance to coming to the Nutcracker than just COVID. It was the new venue. It was developing an audience in a different part of town. But with that second loss, our bank pretty immediately said, "Hey, you're not doing so well at your Nutcracker. We don't know how you're going to pay a line of credit that you've maintained here for 15 years."
Wow.
So they pulled the line of credit. So we went in really a 14-month period, a loss of more than $3 million worth of available working capital. That put us into a cash flow crisis that we had not really anticipated. Uh, and for the next 20 months, we had to find our way to a more stable place to operate.
Mm,
And in terms of crisis, that meant many periods where I came within days of not making my payroll.
geez.
So we never missed a payroll. We never missed paying a bill. We were, because I believe you have to honor your commitments and you have
Sure.
to find a way. Now, in that, I did not have all the solutions. I first had to define the problem. Like, what does this really mean? Can we solve it in the short term? Is it a longer term fix? Do we have an existential issue? Like, could this be the thing that takes the oldest ballet company in America to not the oldest ballet company in America? Um, so there's that. This is the crisis, the crisis that I talk about, uh,
Yeah, I get
and
it.
building from a structural deficit that is common in our field
That's right.
to an acute cash crisis.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's funny if I may interject here, that the arts world has a great term for what all nonprofits face, calling it a structural deficit, right?
Mhm.
Which basically means we have more expenses than revenue coming in through our programs. And so we have to figure out ways, i.e., fundraising or other
Yeah,
sources, to make money to balance our budget or to make some money to put
yeah.
into the next year or season, right? So structural deficit, it's a foreign term to a lot of nonprofit leaders and fundraisers out there because from my experience, it's so unique to the arts world. But it is a great term because it is true.
Mhm.
Your gate, your bookstore, your whatever that you have as a revenue is not going to meet the budget.
Yeah. In our case, a little over 50% of our income comes through tickets, tuition to dance classes, renting out our productions to other companies, and other sort of operating revenue. And then about half of it is contributed support or sponsorship.
That's right.
And it is not, that's not unusual. That's
Not at all.
within sort of the general ranges of how arts organizations operate.
Right.
We definitely depend on the kindness of friends and strangers.
Yeah, absolutely. And every organization has a different mix, right? And we talk
Yeah.
about a lot of sort of safety net organizations that don't have any revenue generating mechanisms. It's a 100% structural deficit.
Yes. They're structured to lose.
Not to
But
minimize your
yeah,
crisis. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's fascinating though. I mean, I guess a takeaway is that crisis doesn't show up politely. it creates interruptions, disruptions, and demands immediate clarity. And to your point, to identify what is the real challenge before you
Mhm.
can properly address it. And I wanted to jump into this conversation or a question about, in your view, what truly defines a crisis? I mean, leaders sometimes label normal turbulence, I guess, as a crisis. In your mind, is that fair, or how do you define crisis?
These jobs running um, nonprofit organizations in particular, I think you face so many daily challenges. I'll give you an example. From a few years ago, I had a morning where before noon, I had serious conversations about reproductive rights as relates to Georgia and some things that were happening politically, and the fact that I employ, you know, childbearing age, highly athletic women whose bodies really deal a little bit differently with reproductive issues. They're not going to know they're pregnant as early as was being legislated for most Georgians as an ability to take action related to that. Uh, Anti-Semitism and Nazis as content of a program that we were preparing for and how to deal with it. And then I think the ability to make cash flow, to make payroll, the
All
subsequent.
by noon.
That was all before noon. Those are the natures of these jobs, and sorting out what are the things that are important uh, versus urgent versus important and urgent. Of those three, all had some level of importance. Was I going to be able to make payroll within a certain number of days? That was my crisis issue. The other two needed thoughtful attention and needed to be really, vetted carefully. But neither were going to have the impact if I could not pay my dancers, pay my orchestra, pay my excuse me, my faculty. Um, so for me, is it existential? Are people going
Yeah.
to lose their livelihoods that rely on the organization? You lose organizational credibility. Could the organization ultimately have to close its doors? That could be financial, could be reputational, it could be, what is going to be the long-term act, and will we be able to meet our obligations? So
Yeah.
if it hits those, for me, that's a crisis.
That's
Um,
such good advice. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Such good advice. Are there particular warning signs that leaders tend to miss when identifying a crisis?
Uh, you know, uh, there are, and they're much easier to find in hindsight.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Which
Tell. Do
which
tell.
I found with our financial crisis. Um, while they can arrive suddenly without warning or without much warning, like COVID, like the housing bubble bursting and Lehman Brothers, all of that happened. Um, for us, it was really, and what I think happens more commonly is there are a series of risk factors that kind of domino together. They
Mm,
line up, and COVID, the move of the Nutcracker, the bank's risk. Like, had we looked at any one of those, I would have thought we should think more carefully about this one. When they lined up one
yeah.
after another, boom, 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 that's what created crisis.
Yeah.
So I was very new at the ballet when all of this happened. It all happened within my first 16 months.
Hmm.
Um, and still learning the organization, still learning the city. But really looking, had I taken a longer view of the plan for the Nutcracker and the plan for revenue, if I'd had more opportunity to critically evaluate that, I might have said, y'all, we need to make some cuts early because
Mm,
do we think the Nutcracker in a new venue is going to do the same as a Nutcracker in a historic venue 10 miles away? Do we,
pre-COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, before you even layer on COVID or all those things, why are we planning for this to do what it has done in other places?
Right. Right. That was
Which,
unfair.
and if I had had the foresight, I might have said, we need to find a 500,000 that we can trim out of this budget now,
Yep.
so that when we sail through this, and if it through some miracle it comes through, we'll be ahead. But to take the steps that you can early to trim the sails
Yep.
is, and identifying the risk factors, I think is vitally important. Um, we were very, very surprised by the bank changing its position.
Right.
But again, if we were more in tune with how banking had changed,
That's right.
and our bank being purchased by a larger bank changes
Yes.
their
Yes.
calculus.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
so I think I think for a leader day to day, really looking at what the big risk factors are and where they vary from normal business. And I think if we had been as attuned, we still would have faced a financial crisis, but we might have been able to mitigate it. We might have
Yeah.
been able to now, 4 years later, be in a better financial position by taking action before the crisis hit.
Hmm. Hmm.
It would not have prevented the crisis, but it would have made sailing through it just a little bit um, less like stormy seas.
Yeah, yeah, right. When there is a crisis that maybe couldn't have been anticipated, there were no warning signs. It just happens, and there's circumstances in all sectors of the nonprofit space that have their own unique crises. If it happens, is there certain things that you think leaders should think about doing? Be prepared to analyze, take steps to, address in the first 24 to 72 hours. So crisis hits, what do you need to do in the first precious, days or hours?
I'll take a line from the movies.
Okay,
If you
please.
watched Apollo 13,
Yes.
um, you hear that famous line, Houston, we have a problem.
Right. Okay.
What follows it immediately is, okay, let's work the problem.
Okay.
And that's what you have to do. You can't allow yourself to lean into
Yes.
a level of panic. You can't allow
Good.
yourself to go this, like, okay, let's work the problem. So first you have to define the problem.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
like, what do you know versus what is your fear response? What are you
Good.
worried about what could happen versus what has actually happened or about to happen? What are the what are the impacts on critical issues of safety, on who is impacted? Like, is it going to impact your students? Is it impact your dancers? Is it going to impact your staff, your audience? Who, like, who is it going to impact and how is it going to roll through? And really try and be as pragmatic as possible. Um, a very wise mentor uh, uh, gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten. This was Marie Matson at the Kennedy Center. She said, never suffer future pain. If you do, you're suffering it unnecessarily if something doesn't go wrong. If something does go wrong, you're suffering it twice. So save the pain for the moment of pain and
Hmm.
just work the problem.
I love it. So good. Well said.
Um, so define it, define who's going to be impacted, define how they're going to be impacted. You can lay out the potential scenarios that you'll want to prepare for, but in those first hours, you have to deal with what's essential, safety. In COVID, it was shelter in place, get everyone to a safe place, make that communication plan, cancel what you need to cancel, and deal with safety first.
Right.
Then you can start to unpack the rest of it. That first crisis period is about calm, define basic action, and begin your communication plan.
Good, good. Is there a way to balance speed with proper decision making when the pressure is sort of most intense?
Well, again, you have to think about what must you do for safety.
Okay, good.
Like beyond all else, you want no one to be harmed,
Yep.
and you don't want to act react rashly or too quickly or too um extremely in a way that until you see how something's going to settle, you really don't know if you need to take that extra step. So get to a place of safety and then begin evaluating what you really need, what decisions have to be made.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then listen, get on the phone with, and a lot of us learned this during COVID. There were so many COVID professional pods. I
Yeah.
was in three of them. One with heads of development, one with arts leaders, um, one with my colleagues, like my colleagues within the organization. And listen, what are people hearing? How are people reacting? Like, because I'm the first to admit there are a lot of people who are way smarter than me. And any smarts I mostly have because I listen to other people
Right.
who have more experience, more wisdom, and then I take what I think works. Um,
Right.
and so I would get on the phone with these groups, or I would call heads of other organizations and say, "How are you dealing with PPP? How are you dealing?" Yeah, and I even spoke with I think I mentioned Virginia Hepner, who's a business leader here. I called her and I said, "Here's where we are. This is what's going on with us financially. Can you sit down and talk through it with me?" She had lived through a similar crisis when she was running the Woodruff Arts Center here in town.
Yeah.
She'd seen it and she'd seen how the community reacts. She also had lived through, groups that operate under collective bargaining agreements, such as our orchestra and dancers and stagehands. She had a lot of depth of potholes to help me avoid stepping into.
Yep.
Um, and I will say, as much as the wisdom, that kind of collective group therapy it's the only place as an executive, a top executive, that you can look to peers and find a safe place to express
Yes.
concerns. When you can find those trusted places, it it makes the loneliness of being in that top job much less lonely.
I love it. What about transparency? Because I think there's always a concern among leaders about how much they should share, uh, and with whom, right? So we're
Yeah.
talking about staff, board, stakeholders. Like during a crisis, how do you think about your transparency and your communication?
Oh, that's been an evolving place in my thought. And I will say, more so than some of my peers, I tend to be more open book because having worked my way up through organizations, um, I recognize that when folks don't have access to information, they
Yeah.
feel that much more vulnerable. And while my mentality is, okay, pause, take the emotion out of it, work the problem, if you don't have information or power or feel powerless, it's very easy to spin into panic. If
Yeah.
if staff or constituents are spinning into panic, they're not a part of the solution. In fact, they'll take more time to manage in getting them out. So I think there's certainly different levels of information and transparency. They all have to be honest. You can't
Mhm.
mislead anyone because once you've lost your credibility, it's you should just go home. Like as a fundraiser, as a leader, as a peer, colleague, once people don't believe you,
Yeah.
you have no shot at being effective or impactful. So with my board chair, who was an incredible partner through this financial crisis, and looking to people like her, she had great thoughts, but she also had access to resources and to leverage them in a way that I could not have known. So by being fully transparent with her, inviting her to work the problem with me, say, here's my problem. I may not be able to pay staff. Here's how I'm thinking I'm going to deal with it. What do you think? What am I missing? Am I addressing the right problem? Here are the levers I know to pull. Do you know any of the other levers that you can pull or that I can pull
Hmm.
that can have a meaningful impact here? And the gift of having a nonprofit board who's committed and passionate and also has resources, um, she immediately got to thinking about what she could do to solve short-term problem, what she could do to inspire others to help solve the problem longer term. So while I was able to dial around and raise some emergency funding from long-term supporters of the ballet, she got to thinking about what she could do. And we crafted a plan together that I will have to say, her name is Nancy Field. She's the board chair at Atlanta Ballet. She said, I'd like to make a gift, but I want to be sure that when we're through the crisis, she was already thinking about what is life like after, which was
Hmm.
really brilliant thinking. I'm going to make a gift, but I'd like it to be an operating reserve. And I would like, when the ballet has money, it's going to pay it back to itself. And I want to begin the funding of sort of a self-housed reserve fund, not an endowment, but a rainy day fund that we keep and that we can draw on as crises arise. She did it as a challenge gift. She said she would only fulfill the full commitment if the board matched it 2 to 1.
Okay.
We were able to, within 2 months, 100% participation by the board, we raised $1.25 million,
Nice.
which carried us for a number of months
Right.
as we were able to craft other parts of the plan. And there was no silver bullet because we were dealing with a deep hole. I was able to do the math and really figured out that we needed over a number of 3 to 4 years to find about 7 million in additional funds to
Wow.
continue operating. And in that time, we still had to get to a balanced budget, or that 7 million would have really done nothing. Um, so we began with the triage. How do you get the money that you need to make the payroll over the periods? And so we started managing cash flow very tightly, and I worked on fundraising peaks and other revenue opportunity peaks. So, but that whole part of the plan only came together because I was willing to trust my board chair to bring her into all of the nuance of what I was dealing with, how we got here, where we needed to get, and then what were some of our sort of acute moments within the process.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we talk about leading people through uncertainty, leading
Mhm.
people during the times of crisis, any thoughts on how you care for the team when
Yeah,
anxiety and fear begins to rise?
yeah. The conversations with my management team and with staff were big topics for us.
Hmm.
Um, Ballet is not a high paying field, so a lot of our dancers and employees felt vulnerable, particularly coming out of the pandemic. Um, we we opted, and I opted for a fairly high degree of transparency. Now, did I ever communicate that we were in days of not making payroll? I might not have ever said that to anyone but my core senior management team. But to the staff, they recognized a problem. And
Hmm.
even if you don't communicate it to them, they were all aware that, man, the Nutcracker was kind of empty this year. That's probably a problem, right? Like they recognize the signs, and
Sure.
without information from above, they're they're going to know there's a problem, but feel like nobody's talking about it, which also makes them think, maybe leadership doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe leadership isn't aware that there's a problem.
That's an interesting interpretation. I mean, an interesting take because that needs to come into the mind of the leader. That needs to be an awareness of them that the possible reactions and thought patterns might be such.
Yeah. So um, we put together a communication plan. I began doing uh, by every other month communications to board staff and a few other committees that were, volunteer committees that were updates on the organization, but always framed within look at what's happening here. Look at the great art that's accomplishing. Look at the transformational education. Look at our mission and what we're doing. And let's look at some successes, but let's put it in the framework of we are in a very challenging time. And as we were able to do that and to say, this is incredible, we want you to also be aware that we need to save. So you may see some changes around the organization, and we want you to know that some of those may be because we're focusing on what is essential to be sure that we're sustaining your jobs, that we're
Right.
sustaining the impact of our mission, and we're looking at things that we have done for years that we might not need to do long term.
Right.
So that they didn't see changes and say, hey, what's going on? Am I going to lose my job? Is the ballet
Yeah.
closing? Like that, those messages, once they take root, they can bleed out into the public, into the funding community, and then you've got a bigger problem.
Yeah. And it helps maintain a certain level of morale that
Yeah.
I imagine a leader needs to keep up and also prevent your own burnout, but burnout in other leaders and staff members
Yeah.
of the team, right? So it has a lot of benefits to be properly communicating during this time frame of crisis.
And it gives people to find the places they can be a part of solving a problem, places they can help us save a little bit of money, places where a purchase doesn't need to happen right away. It can happen, 12 months later to replace some equipment or things like that.
Right.
They know it's not just business as usual, that we're making very, very deliberative financial choices.
Yeah, right. And probably many of them were asked to make their own sacrifices during this time as well.
Yeah.
And they need to see that the leadership is sacrificing as well, that you're looking at all different ways of savings and not just going to them first and
Yeah.
trying to solve the crisis on their backs alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. Well, it's interesting to me that some organizations find ways to simply survive a crisis, and then others emerge stronger. And I know that there's this thought, like never let a good crisis,
Go to
go
waste.
to waste, right? Yeah,
Rahm
thank you.
Emanuel.
So, I mean, which is so true because oftentimes a crisis can help an organization emerge stronger, more nimble, more healthy, whatever, right? So it isn't necessarily the kind of pruning that you want or anticipated, but sometimes that is the outcome. So I guess have you seen crisis clarify mission or sharpen strategy in your time?
It did allow us to focus on what was important. And I won't take credit for this decision because it took place before I arrived. Um, but when the pandemic shut everything down, our artistic director, Gennady Vegan, um, went to the board and said he'd like to keep the dancers on the payroll. And all but two companies across the country put all of their dancers on unemployment, moved
Wow.
them onto the public role.
Right.
Uh, but he was at a point where he was developing an artistic product that was transformational.
Okay.
Like he was transforming a company, and he thought if he lost 3, 6, 9, 12 months of dancer training and
Right.
cohesion as a group, that transformation of the company might stop, might pause,
Agreed. Yeah.
might go backwards.
Yeah.
So he convinced the board that we should keep the dancers on payroll, and he found a way to work with them remotely. They built rolling bars for them to exercise on with plexiglass shields so that you could space them, but also so that there was a barrier between them and anyone on the other side of it so that you could see but continue to work. Video classes. They cut up Dancer Marley and dance floor sections, delivered them to everyone's home so that they had at least some space that they could continue some of their athletic training. And then he created a studio schedule and a cleaning schedule that allowed them to come in and work solo and in pairs in pods throughout the pandemic. And
Great.
during that, coming back out the other side, the company was stronger artistically, more cohesive because they had stayed together and kept
Of
uh,
course.
this environment going, this collective learning growing and um, company mentality together. So coming out of it, really focusing on how do we use this time? We did some realignment in fundraising. We did some realignment in marketing too, to say, what is it going to look like coming out the other side? And do we just taking that time to say, do we just need the same marketing operation we needed before? Or while they're not in the grind of building a season and all of the functional things, can they think about their work in a different kind of way? And so some of those
Yes.
things happen. And right now, our sales are stronger than they've been in more than a decade.
I love it.
Subscriptions are up. I think 2013 was the high level for Atlanta Ballet. We are
Yeah.
now at those levels. When you're taking the breather, that something like COVID allowed, how do you use that time productively? And you can't do it if you're panicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so on this topic, is there a quick answer why some organizations grow stronger and others kind of fracture, maybe not die, but weaken during crises?
I don't know if there's a simple answer. At least I don't know a simple answer. I think those who come out stronger on the other side are looking to the future. They're looking at every moment in crisis to say, is there an opportunity here too?
Yeah.
And maybe they find it, maybe they don't. But I think the ones um, that find something to look forward to and point towards will find a way.
Yeah. Well, that board chair lesson you shared with us earlier about being able to say, hey, there's going to be a future. I'm looking at it and we need to prepare for it
Yeah.
is a just a valuable lesson. Um, so we'll kind of wrap up here with a few questions around donors and external stakeholders, and then maybe, if you're going to be able to prepare for the next crisis. So, any sort of advice on how to manage boards during a crisis? Because I think that is often a struggle for a lot of executive leaders.
Board management is the hardest thing that I think we do. Um, in the case of some of the best boards, you find people who are passionate, moderately knowledgeable about your field. So a lot of what I have focused on with my board here has been education.
Okay.
Is not just we're making this decision, there's the outcome, but here are the factors that we're dealing with. And I do think that trusting your board to understand your business and trusting them with what the real factors you think of as a leader is essential. Um, because even as adult learners, they don't know what they don't know.
Hmm.
And they may apply, if they're running a financial services firm, there'll be some comparable things, but then there's some things that are so unique to the organization that you're running that don't apply in the for-profit world.
Thank you for calling that out. It's so important for board members to understand that, yes, there are some similarities to maybe the business that they're in or run, but
Yeah.
there are substantial differences. And it doesn't make their business right or wrong or the nonprofit's right or
Yes.
wrong. It is the way it is, oftentimes.
I developed my own uh, sort of thought is that anytime a solution to a problem begins with, can't we just? Um, I know that whatever follows is going to be probably the worst idea that has been presented. You listen to it
Right.
anyway.
Yeah.
But a lot of sharing, a lot of education, a lot of listening. Again, because with better information, I didn't know that my board chair had access to some of the resources that she did. I did
Good.
not know how she responded in crisis. I had to trust. I had to give her information. I had to trust. And then as she came back with ideas, I had to field them respectfully, even the ones that were not as centered in how the business actually functions. I had to help her understand why those didn't work, not just say no.
Mhm.
And then, and I think one of the most important factors in board management is giving credit. I've been very, very purposeful in places where we come up with an idea together to say, I really want to thank Nancy or another trustee for helping me think through this problem and helping me come to the solution. Uh,
Right.
because their ownership in the idea in is essential in activating them and their peers in other ways.
Right.
Ultimately, you need a team, and a team needs to be thanked and recognized, whether they are board or whether they are staff. Whether it is the stage manager or the head of the finance committee. Uh,
Yes.
it they will lean in further if they feel appreciated and valued.
I love it. Okay. So, kind of final question here, and it's preparing for a crisis, which is the worst way to end a
Yeah.
show, but but it is what it is, as I said before. So, for leaders out there who maybe haven't faced a major crisis, or for leaders that just want to be ready for the next one. Any advice on how to prepare? Any advice on just things to do in anticipation of an inevitable crisis in the future?
Build your network. It is people who will help you get through any challenge, whether that is your board, whether it is your colleagues, whether it's people in other fields. Build a network of people you can pick up the phone and who will answer the phone, um, who can help you solve your problem. I'd say that is number one. It comes
Hmm.
down to having a group of people around you that are rooting for you and are willing to answer the phone when you call, which means, the simplest things in life to have good friends, be a good friend, you know, be a good colleague, and pick up the phone when other people call. Um, that is a karmic thing that will make a big, big difference. Other ways to prepare. I like to look at long-term trend lines to see if are we moving in the right direction or wrong direction long term. Whether we make our goals this year or next, are our goals moving us somewhere? And is
Mm,
that somewhere they're taking us aligned with who we want to be, what we want to
good.
accomplish? But really, I like to dig deep into data and see if there are things that are red flags.
Good.
That takes some time. It takes a good team around you who can help you, identify the red flags too. So that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah, well said. Well, Tom, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience and your insight. Crisis leadership is not something anyone hopes for, but it is something every serious leader must be prepared to navigate. What I appreciate most about this conversation is the reminder that managing through crisis is not about having all the answers It's about presence, clarity, discipline, communication, and care for people. And as you pointed out, your network, because it's going to be the people that pull you out of it or help you through it. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of Lead for Good. If you found the conversation valuable, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with fellow nonprofit leaders. But until next time, we wish you all the best and encourage you to do what you can for this world by leading for good. Bye all.
Thank you for joining us for this most recent episode of Lead for Good. Our passion is helping nonprofit leaders reach their full potential as leaders, and we sincerely hope this episode has been edifying for you. Please subscribe to this podcast to not miss any of our Lead for Good conversations. We welcome your feedback, suggestions, and comments via email at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Lead for Good is a production of Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership. Please visit us on the web at www.fulcrumleader.com. Until next time, we wish you all the best and encourage you to always lead for good.